one of the points in talking about medieval monasticism is to talk about the development of scholasticism. Now what that is the scholastics. They had developed a system of education and knowledge and development of the mind that was systematic, and that's where we get the entire university and school system. And that's what's really important to understand, that it was developed from a mixture of pagan, Hellenistic disciplines mixing in Christian concepts with them. And the Catholic Church had developed what's called universities and colleague schools or colleges. And it's developing the mind in a very particular way, a very systematic way of a worldview that is fundamentally Catholic. That's a very important thing to understand in the development of even our educational system is based from medieval mystical monasticism. Very fascinating to really look into these things, because a lot of times we think our minds are free and we're free thinkers, and we go to school to give us a free thinking mind. But it's interesting because it's a very systematic and very forming of your thoughts that come from scholasticism. And that's how university curriculums are blueprinted after, is that. So a lot of times we have the perception that we are free thinkers, but it's almost like watching a TV show of Darren Brown, around a neurolinguistic programming, and you're thinking that you're freely choosing numbers or choosing an answer for something, but everything around you in your climate is cueing you towards an ultimate conclusion and a conviction that you really believe that you came to that on your own free thinking. But in reality, your mind is moldable. And even though the things that you feel are utterly true and that you've come to those conclusions yourself, you haven't. You have fallen prey to your susceptibilities. And that's what's really important to understand. That's why I think it's very powerful to understand that when God says, only God and His Spirit is the truth and will set you free, because this entire climate that we're in is contrived by another power. And it's very important to really lay a hold of that. So if your mind is to really be set free, it's not going to come from going to a university, and it's not going to come from pouring yourself into the social life. It's going to come from Him who alone made you, and it's going to be His Spirit that will set your mind free from this world system. For example, here in this college, this little publication from the Jewish students is called Leviathan. And we've talked about Leviathan really coming from Hobbes's concept of really government, and the idea of, so what if he's a bad guy? He's binding all of us together, and we are all behaving because we have an ultimate authority, even if it's a dictator, that creates stability. So in talking about scholasticism, why is that important? Is because basically Thomas Aquinas, who put together the entire theological landscape of the Roman Catholic Church during medieval time, it was really, the blueprint or the schematics that they used to pull together the entire logic system for it. How do you educate it? How do you teach the world this point of view? How do you teach the priests? How do you teach the congregation? How do you teach the mind of the world? So they pulled together the scholasticism. The entire educational system was organized, built upon this. And so that was the grand scheme of having dominion over the world, is to educate the world over generations with the Catholic worldview, without them understanding that it was Catholic. Because Catholicism, a lot of people just think it's a religion, it's a Christian religion, but it's not per se. Catholicism means universal. We get the idea of university. It's all the world's thoughts put together in a cohesive, what's called a Neoplatonistic view, a hermeneutic, a way of thinking that strings all thought, all religions, all ideas together into one mind. And that's the point of scholasticism. It's the actual training structure for the world, that whatever you're trying to learn, if you're trying to learn about psychology, sociology, science, medicine, whatever it is, that you have required courses to go through, and in fundamental worldview that you're going to literally be leaving with a mind of this world that feeds into an ultimate form of consciousness. And that is what's so important to understand about scholasticism, is that it is a designed and engineered program to mold minds and perceptions, even if they don't know that they are being molded. And all the knowledge and education, all the various books and studies and everything else is very fascinating. It is ultimately to give you the real sense of enlightenment, but it's a very railroaded system of thinking. And that's why you get these young people, you walk through this campus, it's fascinating to see all of these young people, these very young minds coming from high school, and they're getting the sense that they're being liberated in a kind of a liberation kind of theology, an idea of free thinking and social justice. And they get the sense that they are free, but in reality, they are literally being programmed and being coded in their mind that this is a very old and a very precise science. It's the science of neuro-linguistic programming. Neuro, the way your brain patterns things, language, and the programming that goes on in there to give you predictable ways of thinking and reacting. Very fascinating, but that is happening at university and college levels.
Roman mind. Roman philosophy and the good life is next. It's crazy.
Here we go, the Stoic and the Epicurean. And everyone thinks that, look at this, I have my own thinking, I'm a critic, I'm a cynic. I'm a cynic, I'm my own free thinker. No, you're not. You are totally a part of a contrived thinking process. Look at this. Here's their Neoplatonism and Christian thought. Or how about this? Let's get into Augustinian tradition. Wait, let me see. So Neoplatonism, it's Augustine. So this stuff goes in your brain. This goes in the brain. This gets inside of your head. You're not a free thinker. It's these people's thoughts in your head. Philosophers of consciousness. Here we go. Here's our ontology of consciousness. Yeah, I'm crazy, right? Because I'm actually describing this stuff. I'm the crazy person, folks, because I'm describing this stuff. I read this stuff. I get into it. I know it's going in the brains of kids and people in this society, and they're calling it a liberated mind. But I'm crazy because I'm describing all this stuff. I'm against it. I'm not the crazy one. I'm not the one advocating this and calling it good and normal, Right. Look at this. This is great. This is the ontological stuff. This is where you start to confuse what is mental, what is physical, what is scientific, what is spiritual, what is, it's these kind of meta physics that we get into.
What is reality?
Yeah, well, perception is reality. I mean, really? This is the kind of value system you want, like the kids that you're raising to have. You want this mind that's not of Christ, but of this world. It's amazing. It's amazing that we've Christianized things like Plato. Like, Plato was not a Christian. He was the most core pagan that you can possibly think of with false science. Very fascinating. Look at this. I'll give you one more book. How about this? Knowledge and Reality. This is deconstructing reality into forms. The only reality the Bible talks about is Christ as reality. And all of this was made in His image. But it's just an image. He's reality. All this stuff, material, is a non-reality. Here's some irony for you. The tragedy of reason. Just put these two together. But Plato's form, concept of form. I'm not making this stuff up. This is the kind of stuff that's going in these abstract concepts, and they're forming the view of reality. It's shaping the concepts of what is real and what is moral in every sense of the word. And we happily as Christians send our kids to these schools saying, oh, this is a good thing, and thinking it's not impacting their spirituality other than just their moral life of what happens in the dorm rooms. This is immoral. This is corrosive. This is impacting them for the rest of their lives. And then we're applauding this because they put the tassel on one side of their little square head, a little square hat. This is amazing. This is what we don't understand. We don't understand the impact of perception. This is all shifting of perception. That's what's so important to understand. They make it like this is all valid. Like this is valid thinking, this is valid knowledge. And then Christianity becomes a fairy tale. This is what I'm talking about, folks. This is what I'm talking about. This is Hegel's writings, the Hegelian dialectic, the concept of triadism. In other words, what is reality? It's a thesis, and then you have an antithesis, and then you have what's called a synthesis. You have a problem, a reaction, a solution, and it creates a synthesized reality. And that's where your PR material is built from. This is where concepts of society, of what truth is, what is a collective truth, is all coming from Hegel's work. And who studied Hegel? 2 schools came out of Hegel that produced, are you ready for this? Karl Marx. He was completely immersed in the school of Hegel and the concept of politics and what is the ultimate good for society, and the Germans of Nazism. They had the same ideas, and they're going to create another reality, a nationalist socialist concept of a perfected utopian society. These were 2 people coming out of schools of utopian society. That's what Hegel's talking about. Contrived utopian society that God says is a lie. It is a fantasy. It's building kingdoms that are false, that will be destroyed and brought down by God. Hegel is basically the architect of that kind of stuff. But it's not coming from Hegel, it's coming from another mind. But this is what they study. And this is considered valid. Phenomenal, look at this. This is all Hegel. Phenomenology, the concept of phenomenon. All this is phenomenology of Hegel. All stuff. How things come to be. What I mean by triadism is the concept that something has to be triangulated. It has to have this element, and then it has the third element. It becomes crystallized into a thing, a being, an object, so to speak. And so that's why things are constructed with this kind of Hegelian dialectic. You have this side of it, then you have the opposing side, and then you have the side that is synthesized or mediated from it, and that creates the reality of it. But they're all contrived. They're not all different. They're not really in opposition to each other. Republicanism and the Democratic Party is contrived. It's a part of the Hegelian dialectic. And from it comes an ultimate middle ground. And that's reality. Anyway, this is Hegelian stuff. This is what's being taught. It's all, this whole section is Hegel. All of this is Hegel. All of this is Hegel. All of this is Kant's theory. But this is all Hegel stuff. It's fascinating. Sometimes we just think, isn't it great my kids are learning all this neat, deep stuff? All they're learning is paganism. All they're learning is how the mind of this world is constructed. They're fascinating.